National Tsinghua University, National Central University, National Charlton University, and lots of universities. And his research interest is in how Taiwanese technical writers can publish more efficiently in international journals. So let's give us a great applause to our speaker today, Dr. Steve Wallace.
Thank you, Doctor, for your very kind introduction. It's good to be here with you again today. I've been to your university, I think I was counting. This is my 9th time here. This is my second home. I love this place, very nice, and I always get this beautiful room to talk to you. My topic today is one that I've talked about here before, but it was a while ago, and I'm always happy to talk about it again. How we can write an abstract. Abstract is the first thing that our editor and our reviewer will look at when they look at our paper. And if we fail to capture their attention here in those first 15 seconds of their reading, they will never read our paper. If they never read us, they will never cite us. If we have a zero-impact paper, we are very concerned about our abstract. We also know that lazy PhD students around the world often will never read your full paper and will only read your abstract. You know what I'm talking about. When you go to the library and you only find the abstract online, you don't go to your librarian and order the paper to arrive in 2 weeks, do you? No. You read your abstract, and sometimes you may even cite the author only based on his abstract. And what does that mean? It means the abstract better tell the complete story of your contribution. It better be able to sum up the really critical parts of your research, or your research will go unappreciated, unacknowledged. To discuss how it's different in our second hour today. We're going to talk about some critical features of the conference abstract that are not in the paper abstract, but can very much increase our chances of getting that conference submission accepted if we take those into account. So we have a full 2 hours for you today. Don't run away. I will find you. You will be able to use all of the material that we're sharing with you today. If you notice my picture today, and it's a little bit hard to see, but this picture, you can see a little bit better on the monitor. This picture is a picture from a computer game. This computer game is a computer game that PhD students in my writing laboratory just love to play all the time. I've been teaching PhD students here in Taiwan for nearly 11 years. Starting in Jiaodao, Qingdao, and now Taidao. Everywhere they like to play computer games, and they don't like to do research and research writing so much. So the challenge that we have as a writing teacher is to make the writing attractive. So today I'm going to share with you a dirty trick that I use in my writing class to help get students interested in writing. But I got to tell you the story of how I came up with this speech. 2 years ago, I walk into my writing lab. There's a PhD student. He's sitting there late at night. He should be working on his paper. He is in year 6. If he doesn't publish soon, he will die young. Is he working on his paper? No, he's not. He's playing this computer game, World of Warcraft. Don't pretend like you don't know. This is an RPG game, or we call role-playing game, where the student will have a hero. This hero will walk through a virtual online world killing virtual monsters. And when he kills a lot of monsters, he can collect points. And when he collects a lot of points, he can level up. Level 2, level 3. When the student hears the little music, he feels warm in his heart. He feels progress. And I asked this student, why do you like to play computer games so much? You know you need to write your paper. And he said, well, teacher, when I play computer games, I can tell my own story. Now that's what the abstract is. It's the story of our research, exactly. He said, teacher, I can tell my own story. He says, when I play computer games, number one, I have a clear motivation. It's interesting, it's exciting. I know, what I need to do, and it's interesting for me. Research writing is not so interesting. He said, number two, I have a clear mission. I know who I need to kill. I know what I need to do, and it helps to focus me. Number three, he said, I can try different ways to succeed. If I can't kill the monster this time, I will try another way next time and another way until I succeed. And the feeling is good for me, he said. Four, he said, I can quantify my success. Every time I collect 300 points, I hear, no. I level up, and I feel the progress, and it feels good. Fifth, he said, I can make a difference in my online world. He said, I really feel like I have an impact, because when I walk around in my online world, people will look at me in my armor and with my beautiful sword, and they will say, wow, level 23 dragon killer. They're impressed, and I feel good. Now, my student doesn't know it, but he has just exactly outlined the 5 parts of our abstract. Exactly. First, when you write your abstract, you are telling your own story. That's exactly what you're doing, but unlike the computer game, you are the hero in your story when you are writing your research abstract. You are your own hero. And the first sentence of our abstract is called our motivation. Our motivation. We're going to talk about this in a minute. But before you tell people how you solved your problem, you must tell them why you chose this problem. Why this problem and why today? There are many problems in the world, so why should we care about this one? This is the first 1 or 2 sentences of my abstract. 2, objective. My student called it his clear mission. In research writing, we call it our objective. This is what we want to do. We just said there's a problem, but we didn't say what we're going to do about the problem. In the second sentence, or third sentence of our abstract, we will write our objective. The purpose of this paper is to do something. I'll give you some examples in a moment. 3, third sentence of the abstract is we call our methods. My student said he wants to try different ways to succeed. We do that too. In our methods section, we will explain exactly how we fought that monster. What kind of method, what kind of weapon did we use? 4, we will quantify our success, as my student said, and we call that our results, don't we? We will say precisely what happened here. 5, our impact. My student says he wants to have an impact on his online world. As researchers, we have an impact too on other scholars in related domains, on related problems. Here in our final sentences, we will connect to their bigger problems as well, because when you think about it, when we do our research, the research itself is important, but what's more important is how it can help others solve their related problems, right? Isn't that how our impact is determined? Our monster is already dead. How can we tell others how to kill their monster? And here's how we do that. Right in the end, the last few sentences, we will talk about implications for other researchers or for policymakers or practitioners right here at the end of our abstract. Now, I want you to notice how the abstract mirrors our full research paper. If you have a whole research paper and you shrink it down and make it smaller and mini, there's the abstract. All the big parts of the paper are in the abstract. The first sentence, motivation, and second sentence, clear mission, come from the introduction of our paper. Usually from the very beginning, the introduction, and at the end of our introduction, where we talk about our objective. This is sentence 1 and 2 of the abstract, where we answer these 2 questions. Number 1, why should you be interested? That's my motivation. And 2, What problem do we attempt to solve? That's our objective. The third sentence is the methodology. What approach do we use to solve this problem? 4, the results. What happened? 5, the implications. How does this work add to the body of research already available on my topic, on this problem? Most abstracts are between 150 to 200 words. That's the usual journal word count. If you were to write 1 or possibly 2 sentences for each of these, that's about chabudor right, all right? That's about okay for the abstract. As we will discuss later, the conference abstract is longer than the journal abstract. In a conference abstract, most conferences ask from 300 to 500 words. Most journals, 150 to 200. So you see conference abstract is roughly double the length of a conference abstract. Conference is roughly double the journal abstract. So if you write about 2 sentences for each, you have your conference abstract. If you write 1, you have your journal abstract. But the structure is the same. We follow the same structure because this is the structure of our paper. You can also answer these simple 6 questions. Number 1, why this study? Motivation, right? Number 2, what did you investigate? Objective. Number 3, what did you do? Methodology. 4, what did you find out? Results. 5, what do your results mean? Implications. And so what? Applications. We always like to push our work as far as we can into the real world. In the final sentences of our abstract, we do not want our reviewer to say, but don't think about academic writing itself. So in my writing class, throughout the semester, I use this example of storytelling and heroes and monsters because it's more interesting to PhD students than actual writing. So let me just compare, just quickly with you, how you are your hero in your paper. Number 1, both heroes and researchers are judged, evaluated, not by their solutions as much as by their problems. What do I mean by that? Sometimes I read papers that have beautiful solutions to problems I don't have. And there's nothing so useless to me as a solution to a problem I don't have. I'm not interested in solutions to problems I don't have. I don't need extra information. I need information that will help me to solve my problems. So what's the first thing we must do in our introduction and at the beginning of our abstract? We must define an ugly, evil monster so that when you kill that monster, you look like a hero. No monster, no hero. Little monster, we just feel sorry for the monster if you kill a little monster. You have to show us how big and ugly and mean that monster is so that when your solution comes along, we will appreciate it and see its impact. And many times, students don't do this. They think everybody knows why their problem is important, but we don't know. We don't. We haven't been in your lab for the last 2 years. We have no idea why you chose this. So here in the beginning, we will need to dramatize our story a little bit. Long, long time ago, there lived an evil dragon that ate students in TMU. Everyone was terrified. Then we say the day. Try hard right here at the beginning to dramatize the importance in your motivation section of both your paper and of your abstract. Don't neglect this part. You know, others don't. Make sure that you make that clear. Number 2, both heroes and researchers will use methodology to defeat their monster. In our story, the hero uses the sword and the shield, but as researchers we use regression analysis, simulation. We also have our weapons, don't we? And we need to define them well enough so that the next hero can use our weapons to defeat his monster. We're going to discuss that a little bit more when we get to the methodology part. Let's talk about storytelling and research writing and talk about how those are similar. Number 1, both stories and research must be interesting, or no one will tell that story again, or no one will cite that paper again. Now, by interesting, we mean help someone solve a real-world problem. Both must be well told. Have you ever heard a story 2 times, and the first time you heard the story was boring? Why? Because the storyteller was boring. He couldn't tell the story well. He jumped to the end, and then went back to the beginning, and he forgot the middle, and you gave up and didn't care. The next day you heard the same story, but this time the story was so interesting. What changed? The storyteller changed. This storyteller, he knew how to tell the story. He knew how to create the suspense. So you listened. Even though you already knew the story, you still listened and you still liked it. The same with our research. In fact, let's go back to stories. I could say, and I think I would be right, that the way you tell the story may be more important than the story. Because a bad storyteller can kill the best story, right? And a good storyteller can make even a boring story kind of okay. Well, I want to make a radical suggestion to you today. I want to suggest that the way you write your research may be more important than your research. Now, before you throw things at me, let me defend this with some research that I did and I've shared here before. This is the result of a study I did over 5 years, 175 rejected papers, Jiaoda, Tsinghua, electrical and mechanical engineering departments. I collected the editor and reviewer comments for rejection of these research papers. Let me go through the categories with you, and as we go through, let's ask ourselves, is this reason related to story or storytelling? Research or research writing? And let's determine which one is actually more important for getting our work accepted. 7%, faulty methodology. The math is bad, the numbers are bad, reject. This is a research problem. This is a story problem. Right? Number 2, inadequate references. You didn't put enough citations in your paper, reject. This is a story problem, a research problem. 9%, poor quality supporting figures. I don't understand your figure and your table and your graph is confusing to me. Reject. Is this related to research or research writing? Research writing. This is how we present the work, not the work itself. This is a storytelling problem more than a story problem. 7%, outside the scope of the journal. It's a good topic, but bad for us. Goodbye. This is a research problem, a story problem. 8%, not enough contribution to field. It's not important enough, reject. 13%, authors did not follow the manuscript instructions. We're talking here about the ITA, the instruction to authors, that the editor will carefully write down on his site. Let me just tell you that he will give you instructions on how to format, how to outline, what symbols to use, how to space. If you ignore his instructions, he will ignore your paper. He's very serious about these. Is this a story or a storytelling problem? Storytelling. The next one. Poor writing style and use of English, 27%. Biggest piece of the pie right here. Is that story or storytelling? Storytelling. 2%. Your title doesn't match your study. Is that story or storytelling? Storytelling. 16%. Subject of little novel interest or generally not applicable. Now, this is a tricky one because some of this is going to be research. But I also want to suggest some of it is the research writing. When the reviewer makes this comment, what is he saying? He's saying nobody can use your work. Not useful. He's saying your discussions are not clear. He's saying you did not push your work into other people's work and into the real world like we talked about. You did not make the good implications. I don't know what to do with it. Part of that's a storytelling problem as well. 7%, poorly written discussion. Storytelling as well. Notice that we are rejected more for our poor storytelling, here, than for our story. Storytelling is more important than story, both with stories and with research, which is why it's so important that we spend time learning how to write our research well, right? We can have wonderful work, spend 2 years in the lab, and fail simply because of bad storytelling. We've got to be taking the time here to make sure people can appreciate the good work that we've done through good research writing. Let's take a look at why the abstract is important. Well, we've already talked about this a little bit, but abstracts are used by both conferences and journals. And often, only the abstract is indexed online. Your full paper is not there, only your abstract. And if your abstract is not interesting, no one will ever read that full research paper. Thus, abstracts become even more important today. I'm going to discuss a little bit later about how important keywords are in the abstract for finding it, but we'll save that for our second hour. The purpose of the abstract is like a movie preview. Have you ever gone to the movies? Of course you have. You're waiting for your movie to show. And they will show you a few short seconds of other movies before the movie you want to watch, right? Maybe 15 seconds, some exciting scenes. And as you are watching this movie preview, you will decide in about 15 seconds whether you want to watch it or don't. Whether it's interesting or not. And that's exactly what your abstract is. It's your paper preview. Your reader is deciding in about 15 good verb. Often I see titles without a verb, and that's a pity, because verbs are so useful in titles, because they can show our results. Let me give an example. This is 2 weeks ago. I had a student bring me their title, and their title was something like, X affects Y under these conditions. And she asked me, how can I put my results in this title? And I said, give me a better word than affects. X affects Y. How does X affect Y? And she said, well, X increases Y. I said, well, then put increases. X increases Y under these conditions. Now, my reader can just look at my title and glean my key results only from the title alone. This is not always possible, but always try to do that. If we can give clear results in the title, more likely that we're going to get that insight. Because our reader will be getting more information from the very first line that they are reading in our paper. Let me give you some story titles. These titles, first of all, are short, and short is good. The Three Little Pigs. Now, obviously your paper title will be longer than this title because your story is longer than this story. But notice how the author has put all the keywords in the title that we need to understand. They're three, they're little, and they're pigs. And we can begin to sort of have the key point. How about this story? Title.
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty. She's beautiful and she is sleeping. And we can start. Jack and his device, the beanstalk. We have all the keywords right there in the title. They don't tell us the whole story, but they do give us those keywords that we need to begin to understand it. Snow White and the 7 little dwarfs. She's white like snow, and there are 7 little men. Little Red Riding Hood. She's little. She has a red riding hood. Whatever you do, do not try to put all of your work in the title. It should contain the fewest possible words that describe the contents of the paper. Another thing about titles, we must avoid jargon, non-standard abbreviations, and unnecessary detail. Now, what is jargon? Jargon are those technical words that you know in your laboratory but nobody else knows. That's jargon. The same for abbreviations or acronyms. One of my students brought me his paper, this is last year. I still remember his title. His title was, Using the RBGW Minimum Method to Reduce CPU. And I said, what does that mean? He said, everybody knows what that means. I said, nobody knows what that means. You know what that means in your lab, but not outside of your lab. Now, obviously, there are technical words for domains that your other researchers will understand. Here's a good test if something is jargon or not, okay? If people outside of your lab and in your department, in other labs, know the keyword, it's probably okay. But if only those people in labs or highly related labs know your keyword, it's probably jargon. Your acronym, your abbreviation is probably not well understood. And it's easy for us to forget what is well understood because we understand it so well. So it's a good little simple test. Walk around your college, ask people in the wider domain if they understand. If your wider domain understands, okay. But if just your lab or highly related labs understand, it's jargon. It's jargon. And we do not define jargon, acronyms, or abbreviations in our title. This is not the purpose of the title. We do not define it in our abstract either. We define it in our introduction. We have space there. We do not have space for defining all of these terms in our title or abstract. Thus, we will keep them out of these two important parts. Let me show you an example of a poor title. Mouse behavior. Why is this title poor? Well, I don't know what kind of behavior he's talking about. I also don't know what is influencing the behavior. I don't have a modifying agent. What's a better title? Well, the student came up with this one. The effects of estrogen on nose-twitch courtship behavior in mice. Okay, now I have a modifying agent and a specific behavior. I'm happier. But am I very, very happy? No, I'm not. Why? Remember, our ideal is always to put the results into Title II, right? And we said the key to putting the results in the title is finding a good verb. Can we do that here? Yes, we can. Estrogen stimulates intensity. Here's my good verb of nose-twitch courtship behavior in mice. Now I know exactly what is happening. I have his value, his impact right in my title. And that's a harder working title. Now sometimes we have to write out 20, 30 different titles and play with them for a long time. But it is time well spent. Because the title is the first line, even before the abstract. If the title fails, no one will even reach your abstract. So the title better be the best part of your paper. Thus, spend more time here than any other place throughout our paper. Let's go to the first sentence of our abstract, which we call our motivation. Motivation. In this sentence, we will answer the question, why did you study the problem? And we remember, we must answer why before we say how. Nothing wastes more time than giving me solutions to problems I don't have or don't care about. I need to make them care about the problem here. I need to make a super ugly monster here so that my reviewer, my reader, my editor will appreciate what I have done when I solve it. Now, don't assume people know. How do stories do this? Well, when you read a story, stories often begin by creating the background. And by creating the background of the story, we can appreciate the motivation of the story. We can appreciate why the story is important. Usually we begin the background by saying time and place. Example. Long, long time ago, in a land far, far away. Where did it happen? Long, long ago. Where? Far, far away. We give the time and the place in the beginning of the story. In our paper, we frequently do this too. But instead of time, we will use previous studies. That's a common beginning, isn't it? Previous studies did this. Previous studies did that. Previous researchers tried to kill the X monster, and someone tried to kill the Y monster, but nobody killed the Z monster. We will create our knowledge gap, our motivation, by talking about the background. And we use a strong to sentence. I'll give you some examples in a moment. We do this in the computer game as well, or in the story. In the story, the hero wants to save the princess, to obtain the treasure. You see the strong to sentence there? Very easy for me to follow exactly what he wants to do. Let's go to my Zhongyang paper, student's paper again. Here's his second sentence. His first sentence was his motivation. Here's the second one. He says, this paper presents an approach for calibrating GPS positioning directly from, by using the context awareness technique from pervasive computing. The paper proposes a novel approach called perceptive GPS, PGPS, to improve GPS positioning accuracy directly from the contextual information of received GPS data. What does he want to do? To improve GPS positioning accuracy. He told me directly here in his second sentence. And in the end of his paper, when I'm reviewing his paper, I will see, did he do this or not? Accept or reject, it will be a big part of my decision. But he has defined success very carefully here, right in the second sentence of his abstract. Now, this sentence comes from the end of the introduction in your full research paper. Usually, right before our methodology, we will define our abstract, our objective in our research writing paper. But in the abstract, this comes very quickly. Second sentence here. Both sentence 1 and sentence 2 come from the introduction of our paper. Here's another example of an objective. This is a physics paper. Different domain, same structure. Here's the sentence. The theoretical modeling of the waveforms that would be produced in particular systems will expedite the search and analysis of the detected signals. The characteristic formulation of GR is implemented. Why? To obtain an algorithm capable of evolving black holes in 3D asymmetrically flat spacetime. This is not my domain. I really don't know what he's talking about. However, I can clearly see his objective to obtain an algorithm. Why? Because he's following the scientific convention. And he's exactly putting his objective here, correctly, right after his motivation, in the beginning of his abstract. Here's another objective, different domain, same structure. An aim of our experiment was what? To determine if an imperfect listening typewriter would be useful for composing letters. What does he want to do? He wants to determine. This is his goal, his purpose, his objective. He tells me right here clearly in the beginning of his abstract, second sentence of his abstract. Third sentence of the abstract we call our methodology. This sentence comes from the methodology part of our paper. Okay? And in this sentence, we will answer the question, what did you do? You just said why you want to solve the problem, what problem you're going to solve. Now you need to tell me how you're going to solve it. There's a lot of ways you can fight a monster. You could use the sword and the shield. That would be what we would call a conventional approach, a conventional method. If you tell a hero, I used a sword and a shield, every hero knows what is a sword and what is a shield. I don't need to go into so much detail, right? But if I develop some new way to kill monsters that no hero has used before, then I'm using a novel approach, right? I'm using a new method, and I will have to show in much more detail how I fought that monster. I will have to explain it in enough detail that another capable researcher, as we say, capable researcher, could repeat my study. Capable researcher is a tricky term, isn't it? We are not assuming that we are talking to high school students. We are assuming that the scholars who follow me will be familiar with the basic equipment in a typical laboratory. I will not have to explain to them what the test tube looks like and what beaker to use. We assume that they're familiar with those basic tools that we will use in our lab. But we must give enough detail so someone like us, essentially, could repeat this experiment. Now, if you use the conventional method, again, you can be quite short. Usually when we use a conventional method, we will refer to the previous paper because the previous paper can do the dirty work for us, right? The previous paper can go into all the detail. In a conventional paper, part of our contribution, in a novel method paper, a lot of our contribution is the method. So we will have to go into far more detail there in order, and our methods will usually be a lot longer in a novel method paper as well. Here is a sample abstract methodology section of a paper, of an abstract. Third sentence of the abstract. My student says, to utilize the characteristics of GPS sequential and temporal data, PGPS starts by sampling received GPS data and builds a stable transition probability matrix based on a derived Newton-Markov model to learn the carrier's behavior. This is electrical engineering. It's a different domain. I don't understand it. However, it definitely looks like methodology. Why? Notice the first word, to utilize. We often see that word here in this third sentence, to utilize or using. Why? Now we are getting our hands dirty. We are doing something. We're not just talking about motivation. People shoot at me during the Q&A. Why don't I just stay here in Taiwan where it's safe and warm? And the answer is, we go to conferences to get published. This is the single best thing we can do to increase and improve our chances of publication for several important reasons. I'm just going to discuss these very briefly. But there is, in publishing, there are some dirty politics. By that I mean that friends accept friends' papers. So those researchers who have a lot of friends, who are their reviewers, are more likely to be published. And this is natural human nature. If I know you and you're my friend, even if I don't consciously think of it, I will be influenced to look more positively on your work and on your paper. And this has been shown in research. One very famous study, I remember, by Eberharter. Eberharter noticed an interesting trend. He looked at the top 10 journals in every domain. And he saw that a high percentage of the papers in the top journals were never cited again by anyone. Even the author never cited these papers. Between 20 to 50% of papers in top journals were zero-impact papers. And he asked, how can this be? His results are very interesting. Basically, what he showed is that in every domain, there's a small group of researchers who know each other and recognize each other's research and always say, yes, my good friend, accept. Now, when I tell students this, they get very concerned and they say, it's not fair. Of course, they're right, it's not fair. And then they say, we must fight the system. But this is where they're wrong. We don't want to fight the system. We want to join the system. How do we join the system? By going to conferences and shaking hands. This is the only place where you can meet your reviewers at a conference. Let's talk for a minute. Who are your reviewers? Your reviewers usually are chosen from the references in your paper, because your editor doesn't know your domain as well as you do, so he will scan through your references to choose suitable reviewers. So when you're choosing a conference, where should you go? You should go where your references are going. Why? Because they're your reviewers, and friends accept friends' papers. So we want to go to those conferences, and we want to meet as many reviewers as we can. And in my conference presentation class, which I'm teaching this semester, we push students a lot to practice this skill. We don't want them to go to a conference and sit in the corner, wasting all of those good opportunities, watching their reviewers go by. No. We want them to be walking around, shaking hands and making guanxi, buying their reviewers coffee and chanju maicha. Because we know that friends accept friends' papers. We know that this is increasing our chances of publishing. We know if you make a friend today, he could be accepting your papers many, many times before he retires. We know that if you make an enemy, he could be rejecting you many, many times before he retires. We are very concerned about this reviewer relationship. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you can write bad English and do bad research and just make friends. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that your research is important. English, very important, but the third political aspect we do need to consider. Two humans with very human motivations will decide whether we live or die. And if we can meet those people in advance, that's better for us. That's better. So we can meet our reviewers. Second, we can meet our editor. Your editor is a very important customer as well, isn't he? Because your editor decides if you are rejected with no review, which happens quite often. Your editor also chooses your reviewer, and he knows who the nice reviewers are and who the mean ones are. So your editor is very important. So conference is a good place to meet him as well. We can go to his session and sit in the front row. And when he's talking, we will go like this with our eyes. And we will nod our heads slowly, even when we don't know what he's talking about. Because we want to impress him with what good PhD students we are. And then hopefully, after his speech, we will go and shake his hand and say, "Sir, your research is very important for my research." And he will say, "Oh, what's your research?" We will tell him, because it's easier to get those invited papers published than those papers that you send without invitation. Basically, we have a lot of wonderful opportunities at a conference we don't want to waste, particularly with meeting editors, reviewers, finally, co-authors. It's difficult to meet people to collaborate with from around the world if you only stay in Taiwan. But when you go to a conference, you can find people from your narrow field across the whole world. It's easier to publish those cross-national studies too. Journal editors like to see that. It's a wonderful opportunity to find a potential co-author also. So here's why you should want to go. Since we want to go, first we have to write a good abstract, right? That will get us accepted into this wonderful opportunity to meet all these reviewers. And that's the advice that we'll be discussing in my following slides. Let's talk about the different types of conference. First, we have what we call theme-based conferences. A theme-based conference is usually centered around one problem or one issue. And all of the topics will discuss this problem or this issue. Second, we have what we call general conferences, which will cover a variety of problems in a wider domain. And third, we have professional conferences, which are usually focused on practitioners. Real doctors, real engineers, real educators will go, and all of the presentations are usually more practitioner-focused. In addition, we have colloquium, single speaker, and symposium, more than one speaker. We also have what we call single and multiple track, which means one speaker at one time or more than one speaker at the same time in sessions. We also have web conferencing and web seminar, which we call webinar. These are convenient, but I don't suggest them. Why? Because you can't make the good guanxi online, that's why. You need to meet them face-to-face and buy them coffee. And it's difficult to do that when you're only looking at a computer screen. It's hard to make good friends when you can't actually chat with those people that you are meeting. We have different conference paper types. We have the paper with respondent, which is usually the 30-minute presentation, followed by 15-minute response from another opinion, opposing view, followed by a final 15-minute response by the original speaker. We have panel, which is usually 3 to 4 experts, often within a domain, who will discuss something. We have round table, 5 to 9 people who will talk. We have workshop, which is usually longer time, over an hour, on a particular topic of interest, specialty. We also have poster talk, poster presentation, poster discussion. These are also good opportunities to meet editors, reviewers, co-authors. We talk a lot about poster design in my conference class. One thing we want is to make our poster attractive, because we don't want to stand there looking like an idiot for 3 days when people walk by ignoring us. Right? We want people to stop and talk to us. We want to attract them. One of my students, recently, he had his poster, and he did a very good idea. He had a bright, bright pink poster. It was so pink, just really, really pink. And he wore a pink shirt that exactly matched the pink poster. It was, that guy had so many editors and reviewers. He won our competition, which is how many reviewers can you meet. He won by a lot, because everyone said, wow, pink poster, wow, pink shirt, what's your research about? We will try to attract attention. We will not waste time being shy and modest. One student, no one was talking to him. He stood there for 2 days, not a single person talking. He was like the invisible man standing there. So I was thinking, how can I get people to talk to him? Finally, this is what I did. I bought a bowl of candy. And I put the candy in front of the poster. And then people would stop and take our candy, and we would jump on them. And talk to them about our research, and they would listen because they felt guilty. They did our training. Whatever works, we will do it to make sure that we can, again, talk to as many people as we can. Every opportunity we can there at the conference to read and decide. Make a good first impression, which means meet the deadline. Don't be late. It suggests poor planning, and you may be rejected for that. Customize your abstract for the conference. This is important. Let me talk about this a few minutes. There are many different conferences in your domain. Okay, let's take my own domain, for example. My broad domain is industrial engineering. But I focus particularly on product usability, high-tech product usability, especially technical documentation and heuristic tests. So that's a very subdomain on a subdomain. I'm not going to go to industrial engineering conferences. It's too wide for me. But technical documentation, heuristics, sure, I'm there. That's my particular subtopic. Now, when I write abstracts, I want to be sure that the people who are looking at my abstract understand that I match the scope of their conference. So what do? I will go onto the conference website. I will read the aims and scope of the conference, or we call for papers. You see this in your hallway all the time, right? There's a call for papers on the wall. Look at the call for papers. Look at keywords in the call for papers. Why is this important? Well, let me talk a little bit about conference review. If you are submitting to a very good conference, that conference will have two reviews. The first review we call the elimination review. And in this first review, they will hire some poor, tired PhD student to reject 80% of the papers because they don't have time to formally review all of them. Way too many. They need to reject most of them an easy way. This poor PhD student, what will he do? It's early in the morning. He didn't have his coffee yet. He's looking at the abstract quickly. No. Oh, I wish I had coffee. Maybe. No. He's not being that careful. This is my key point. He's not looking very carefully. These maybes will get a formal peer review. The no's are no. We have no chance. What is this PhD student looking for? And how can we use this to our benefit? Well, this PhD student is looking for keywords in your abstract that match the keywords in the call for papers on the conference website. If you talk about the same topic but you use a different way, he may not notice it. He may miss it. You may be rejected for being outside the scope of the conference. So what should you do? Look at the call for papers and copy and paste keywords into the body of your abstract, so this PhD student will ding, 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 maybe. Oh, we passed our first review. We're going to talk about second review in a minute. But the first review, it's about those keywords. So make sure that you've got those keywords clearly in the body of your abstract or in your title, so it's easy for the first review to see. This also means, by the way, that if you present the same work at two conferences, you probably will have two different abstracts, right? Because you will customize your abstract for the aims and scope of each of those conferences to speak their particular language, so that they know that you are for them, that you are talking about their topic. Let me talk for just a minute about journals and papers, journals and conferences for a moment. It's okay to present the same work at more than one conference. It's okay to present a conference paper and then go to a journal paper. In fact, you should tell your journal editor in your cover letter that it was previously in a conference. He will like this. It will be a symbol of quality. You can say, this work has previously been presented at XYZ conference. That's fine. There's no problem there. Usually, the journal editor thinks that the conference is short-term and for intermediate results, incomplete work. And now it is complete and finally got good feedback from the conference and should be published in his journal. There's no conflict there. But you cannot publish two papers in two different journals, right? We do know that. I just want to be sure. You can't present the same paper or can't publish the same paper in two different journals or submit them simultaneously. Let's be very clear about that point. In your conference, as we said, talk about the theme of the conference using keywords from the call for papers. Select a narrow topic. You do not have time in 15 to 20 minutes to present all of your research. If you try, you will miserably fail and die badly in front of many people. I see this all the time, though. People with no conception of what 15 minutes is. They will try to give their dissertation in that time, and they barely finish their literature review when their time is up. Don't do that. In fact, it's better to be deep and narrow rather than wide and shallow. Take a few key results with their implications. If people want to know more, they can read your paper, which is why you print it out and give it as a handout to those people who are interested after your talk. But do not try to do too much. By doing too much, you'll end up doing nothing at all. We will narrow our scope to fewer results rather than try to do them all. Word limit. We already said that conferences usually have 300 to 500 words for the word limit. Journal papers usually from 150 to 200. So we said conferences are roughly double the length of a journal paper abstract. But the same structure. I already told you the structure. Motivation, objective, methods, results, discussion. Same structure here for our conference abstract. We will use a traditional font like Times New Roman 12 point. Don't experiment here with the new cute font that you've just found and you think it's so beautiful. This is not a good time for that. We will follow the very old conventional way. Let me say something about the word limit. One of my students, I remember he told me his conference abstract was 352 words long. 352. The conference said only 300. I said, you should cut your abstract. He said, teacher, no. My research is too important. They will break their rule for me. I told him, you should cut it. He sent it to the conference. Surprisingly, they did not reject him. They accepted him. However, when they published his abstract, they cut the last 52 words out completely. And I remember they cut it even in the middle of the sentence. It was just awful. The last sentence was, it is important that the disappeared. Gone. All his implications, which were really the most important part, disappeared. So even though it's painful to cut, it's more painful if they cut. Be sure that you match exactly the word limit that they give you on the conference site. Here are some notes for the abstract. Do not use company names, acronyms, abbreviations, or symbols. Why? You do our college, not only our narrow lab. Do not refer in the abstract to information that is not in the document. Don't refer to figures and tables, for example. The abstract should always stand alone or be understood by itself. Do not tell your reader that your study does things that it does not do. For example, sometimes our actual research is very wide, but we only plan to present a small part. Make sure the scope of your abstract matches the scope of your presentation. Don't say that my research is this wide, but only present that wide, right? Make sure it exactly matches the scope that you plan to tackle here at the conference. Let's talk about tense. I love tense. I can go on for hours on tense, and I will spare you that pain today. But let me just mention about tense for a moment, especially avoiding the future tense in the abstract. I talked about past tense and present tense in the last hour. Remember? Past tense for what happened, present tense for the fact. Future tense, when do we use it? Almost never, honestly. You could write your whole research paper and never use the future tense. It is not a common tense in writing. So if you find future tense throughout your paper, you probably have a big problem. Especially if you have the future tense in your method. It will make it look like everything's a proposal and you didn't do anything. And you will be rejected for that reason. So be careful. You do sometimes use future tense for future work. Let's say at the end of your paper. But even for future work, we can often use present tense. It's not common, is my point. Especially don't begin your abstract with the present tense. In my presentation, I will Your reviewer will say, please send us your work when you finish. You did finish, but you used the wrong tense. Past tense for what we've done. Present for fact and implication. Future tense, rarely or never in our formal academic writing. Don't use I and avoid the passive voice. Some of you have listened to a long presentation about active and passive from me before. I won't get into that again. But let me just mention that the active voice is shorter and clearer. We must be concerned about how does our paper come up on Google Scholar. Today's scholars don't usually read the hard copy, do they? They look online, they do a search. And especially searches like Google Scholar, search engines like Google Scholar, will look through the abstract to find matches that closely match what the results are, what the author wants. What does this mean? It means if you want your paper to be found and cited, you need to carefully consider what kind of keywords will other scholars use to find my paper. What are the most likely keywords they will use? And I need to put those keywords into the body of my abstract. Don't just put them in the keywords part. Why? Google Scholar now ignores keywords in the keywords part. They don't mean anything. Only in the title or in the body. Copy and paste. If you want to be found, you need to be sure that those keywords are prominent and easy to find for your search engine. Or the JCR site, same thing. Most of you go to the SCI, SSCI list, JCR, Thompson's. They also use a search engine. They also look for keywords. If no one can find you, no one will cite you. What happens next with your abstract? We said it has 2 reviews in a conference. We said the first review is elimination review. Our tired PhD student will reject 80%. The surviving 20% go to what we call a peer reviewer. This peer reviewer's function is very similar to the peer reviewer for a journal paper. This peer reviewer will be an expert in your domain, and he will read your abstract carefully and give suggestions and comments to the conference organizer. He will say, this is good, this is bad, accept, reject. He will give very specific recommendations to the organizer. This is a wonderful opportunity for you as a graduate student. If you are rejected by the conference, you should ask the conference for a copy of your reviewer comments, because you can use those reviewer comments to revise your abstract for the next conference or for your journal paper. Even if you are not accepted to the conference, this can still be a wonderful opportunity to learn from the feedback of 1 or 2 experts in your domain. Now, it is not the policy of the conference to send you your comments. Usually they do not do this at all. So you will need to ask very nicely, dear conference organizer, I am not emailing you to complain about your rejection or argue with you. Make sure you tell them that. However, I am a PhD student trying to publish my work. Those reviewer comments would be very helpful for me in revising my paper. Please send them to me and I will never bother you again. Make sure you tell them that, because they do not want to fight with everybody about the reasons for rejection. If they think that you will be easy and fine, they will send them to you. And several times in my writing lab, we have gotten extensive comments, sometimes 2 pages of very detailed comments that's been so helpful in revising our work for final publication. Now, if you were rejected in round 1, elimination review, you don't have any comments, right? If they say, we don't have comments, don't argue with them. I know you have comments, send them to me. They probably don't. But if you put the keywords in the abstract, like I mentioned, if you made it to the second round, if they have comments, if you ask nicely, they'll very probably give them to you. And they could be very helpful for you as you are revising your work. Let's talk about references for a moment. In our journal paper, we usually have in a 30-minute presentation for English while they run away and you never see them again. So you will practice first a short, interesting introduction to your key results and implications so that people will remember you later or want to work with you or invite your paper. This will not happen by accident, so you should work on it now, here in Taiwan, before you go abroad, so that you can be prepared to answer that basic and very important question, tell me about your research. You'll be ready. You will have practiced it. It will be smooth. It will be prepared. English will be great. But none of that will happen unless you practice first. Also, you can prepare for Q&A at the editors and reviewer sessions. You will be going to your editor and reviewer sessions. Why? You want to meet them and make the guanxi. So, to make good guanxi with your editors and reviewers, you need to ask them nice, easy questions, which you can also prepare in advance. If you read their online abstract, you can get a good, interesting question, and when he says, any questions, you can raise your hand. It will be very easy for you to meet and talk to this key decision maker in your domain. Again, if you practice and prepare a little bit in advance before you go to your conference. Last point, how can you convince your boss to let you go to the conference, and more importantly, to get him to pay money for you to go to the conference? Here are some tips. Number one, conferences can be expensive, so often people are hesitant to sponsor us. But I encourage you to look everywhere. You know, there's a lot of money available for PhD students to go to conferences, not just from your department or school, but from the National Science Council, Ministry of Education, companies, and rich individuals will offer grants, scholarships that go unused every year because nobody does the work to look for and apply for them. Do dig deep. Ask around. You'll be surprised at the diverse sources of funding available to attend conferences. But when you're talking to your boss, tell your boss, boss, I need equipment for this laboratory, for this company, for this hospital. If I was a computer, you would pay money to upgrade me with new software. I am a human computer. I need new software. Conferences are my opportunity. Your boss will say, no. Okay? Well, boss, I will write you a trip report saying all the wonderful things that I learned. I will train the rest of the lab or our department on the key tips, and I will make my handouts a reference for them so you can train one person and then train 15 when I come back. It's a good deal. No, you might say. Okay, I will represent TMU at this conference and recruit students for you so that you have to send somebody. You might as well send me. I will work half the time and attend sessions the other half of the time. If he still says no, I need the guanxi with editors and reviewers, and I will share my guanxi with you when I come back. Finally, okay, I pay half, you pay half. Next year, you pay all. Don't give up easily. Very important part of your academic career. You need to meet those reviewers now. They could be very helpful in accepting your papers for years to come. Before you go, you can email for a meeting with editors if you have a book idea or a paper idea. You can also email the reviewers or your references for a quick meeting. You can say, sir, your research has been very important for my research. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? People like people who like them. He will say yes. That's a great opportunity to actually actively meet those important reviewers when you arrive there. That's all I have for you today. I want to refer you to some reference websites that will be very helpful for you. The first one, editingblog.tw, is my blog where I weekly post answers to questions from around Taiwan about writing and publishing papers in Taiwan. I have a lot of great material there about every aspect that you can imagine regarding writing, English, technical writing, technical English, academic writing especially. And you can see all of our posts there on